13 years ago, a car-sized robot landed inside a crater on Mars, in a spot scientists believed was once the bottom of an ancient lake. Its job was simple on paper: drill into rocks, analyze what's inside, and try to figure out whether Mars could have ever supported life. For over a decade, it found hints, pieces of the puzzle, one at a time. But in a study published this year, NASA scientists announced something different. Buried inside a single drilled rock sample, they found the most diverse collection of organic molecules ever detected on Mars. And one of them looks structurally similar to a building block of DNA. This is not proof of alien life. Nobody studying this data is claiming that, but it is, according to the scientists themselves, one of the most significant discoveries in the entire history of Mars exploration. And the reason why is more interesting than any single headline can capture. I'm your name, and this is your channel. If real space science is why you're here, subscribe. Now, because this discovery deserves more attention than it's getting. Let's start with where this actually happened. NASA's Curiosity rover has spent the last 13 years exploring Gale Crater, a massive impact basin on Mars that scientists believe was once filled with water. An actual lake sitting at the base of a towering mountain called Mount Sharp. Billions of years ago, if Mars ever had a real shot at hosting life, a place like this is exactly where you'd expect to find the evidence. Water, minerals, sediment settling slowly over time, layer after layer, locking in a chemical record of whatever was happening on the surface back then. Around 2020, Curiosity drilled into a rock at a site nicknamed Mary Anning, named after the 19th century English paleontologist famous for discovering some of the first complete fossil skeletons ever found. The location sits within a region of the crater called Glen Torridon, an area rich in clay minerals, the kind of clay that, on Earth, typically forms only where water was once present for extended periods of time. If Mars ever preserved a genuine chemical fingerprint of ancient habitability, this is close to the best possible place to look for it. The sample sat in Curiosity's onboard laboratory for years before scientists ran a very specific kind of test on it, well, a wet chemistry experiment using an instrument called SAM, short for sample analysis, at Mars. This particular type of analysis, called a TMAH experiment, had never been performed on the surface of another world before. Essentially, it's a chemical technique that helps release and identify large, complex organic molecules from rock samples, molecules that standard heating-based methods tend to break apart or miss entirely. And what came out of that analysis was extraordinary. Over 20 distinct organic molecules, more chemical diversity than any single Mars sample had ever revealed. Among them, nitrogen-bearing compounds, sulfur-bearing compounds, and one molecule in particular that made scientists sit up, a nitrogen-containing compound with a structure similar to precursors of DNA. A chemical family never before detected anywhere on the Martian surface. Now, here's where it's important to be precise about what that actually means, because this is exactly the kind of finding that gets exaggerated the moment it leaves a scientific paper. Organic molecules, including nitrogen-bearing ones, structurally similar to DNA components, are not automatically evidence of biology. These same categories of molecules can form through purely non-biological processes, chemical reactions between water and rock deep underground, or delivery via meteorite impacts, since space is full of carbon-rich material raining down onto planetary surfaces constantly and always has been. In fact, the researchers also identified a compound called benzothiophene E in the same sample, a large sulfur-containing molecule that's commonly associated with meteorite delivery rather than biology. According to the scientists, this particular experiment simply wasn't designed to distinguish between those three possible explanations, whether these molecules are the degraded remnants of ancient biology, the products of geological water rock, chemistry, or material that arrived from space and got buried in the sediment. All three remain live possibilities. Nobody involved in this research is claiming they've found evidence of past Martian life. So why does this discovery matter so much if it doesn't answer the biggest question? Because what it does prove definitively is something almost as important. Mars is capable of preserving large, complex organic chemistry for billions of years. Before this, there was a real open question about whether Mars's harsh surface radiation, its thin atmosphere, and billions of years of exposure would have destroyed any complex organic material long before we ever got the chance to find it. This experiment proves that's not necessarily true. Somewhere in that ancient lakebed clay, molecules have been sitting essentially undisturbed for roughly 3.5 billion years, complex enough and intact enough for a rover sitting on the surface to detect and identify them in detail. As Ashwin Vasavada, Curiosity's project scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, put it, the real revelation of this mission isn't simply that Mars was once habitable. It's just how amazingly habitable it apparently was. Not a hostile, barely tolerable environment, scraping by at the edge of what life could survive. but a place where the actual chemical ingredients associated with life on Earth were present, interacting, and evolving in real time. Think about what that means for the bigger picture. Every time curiosity has drilled into this ancient lakebed, it has found another layer of evidence pointing toward the same conclusion. Liquid water, the right minerals, the right chemistry, sustained over long periods in an environment that on Earth would be considered genuinely promising for life to take hold. This latest finding doesn't prove Mars once had life, but it does something almost as valuable. It proves that if Mars ever did have life, or even just complex prebiotic chemistry inching toward it, the physical evidence could actually still be sitting there, preserved, waiting for the right instrument to find it. That's not a small thing. For decades, one of the biggest fears in Mars science was that even if ancient life or its chemical precursors existed, radiation and time would have erased any trace of it long before humans ever arrived to look. This experiment is direct proof that fear was, at least in this case, wrong. There's also a bigger mission context worth understanding here. This wasn't Curiosity's first organic molecule discovery. It's part of a growing pattern. In earlier research, the rover detected the largest organic molecules ever found on Mars up to that point. Compounds called decane, undecane, and dodecane, which may be fragments of fatty acids, again, a class of molecules strongly associated with biology on Earth. Researchers specifically checked whether known non-biological sources, like meteorite impacts, could fully account for the quantities detected. They found those sources alone couldn't explain the amounts present. That doesn't prove biology either. There could be geological explanations scientists haven't fully mapped out yet, but it adds another data point to a growing cumulative picture. Ancient Mars was chemically far more active and far more complex than the frozen barren desert we see today. Put those findings together with this latest DNA precursor discovery, and you start to see why scientists are increasingly comfortable saying Mars wasn't just marginally habitable in its ancient past. It may have been genuinely rich with the right chemistry for life to have had a real shot. None of this changes what Mars looks like today. A cold, dry, radiation-blasted world with a thin atmosphere and no known liquid water on its surface. But it does change how scientists think about its past, and it raises the stakes for every future mission heading there. NASA's Perseverance rover, currently exploring a different ancient lakebed in Jezero crater, has already turned up its own compelling organic signatures. And any future Mars sample return mission, bringing actual physical rock back to laboratories on Earth for far more detailed analysis than any rover can perform on site, could finally have the tools needed to settle the question these findings keep raising but can't yet answer. For now, the honest answer is the most interesting one. We don't know if ancient Mars ever had life, but we now know for certain that the chemical evidence needed to answer that question could still be sitting there, preserved in ancient clay, 3.5 billion years old, waiting for the next rover or the next generation of scientists to dig it up. If you want to know what gets found next, subscribe and turn on notifications, because we'll be covering every update. Drop a comment with what you think, biology, geology, or meteorites, and share this with someone who thinks the search for life beyond Earth is science fiction, because right now, in a crater on Mars, we may already be looking at its chemical fingerprints.